Leviticus chapter 27 verse 34 clearly states these commands were given by God to Moses for the Israelites. The Apostle Paul clearly addressed the issue of how the church is supposed to give money in 2 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 7, which I will be addressing later. I submit to you that Jesus Christ would endorse the food stamp program because he endorsed the tithe program to feed the hungry in Matthew chapter 23 verse 23, which reads as follows. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Jesus Christ endorsed the tithe program to feed the hungry in Luke chapter 11 verse 42, which reads as follows. But woe unto you, Pharisees, for ye tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, and pass over judgment and the love of God. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. In Matthew chapter 23 verse 23 and Luke chapter 11 verse 42, Jesus Christ was talking to the scribes and Pharisees who were operating under the law that required the Israelites to tithe their produce of the land and their livestock to the Levites and Levite priests, as commanded by God in Exodus chapter 23 verse 19, Leviticus chapter 27 verses 30 through 34, Numbers chapter 18 verse 12, Numbers chapter 18 verses 20 through 28, and Deuteronomy chapter 26. The Levites and Levite priests were to offer a tithe or tenth of the tithes that they received from the Israelites to the Lord. The high priest would offer the Lord's portion as a burnt offering, as stated in Numbers chapter 18, verses 25 and 26, which reads as follows. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Thus speak unto the Levites, and say unto them, When ye take of the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them for your inheritance, then ye shall offer up a heave offering of it for the Lord, even a tenth part of the tithe. The scribes and Pharisees were operating under the law. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 23, what is mint, anise, and cumin? It is produce of the land. This verse proves that the scribes and Pharisees were operating under the law given by God to Moses for the Israelites. We see the same thing in Luke chapter 11, verse 42. What is mint, rue, and all manner of herbs? It is produce of the land. This verse coincides with Matthew chapter 23, verse 23, and proves that the scribes and Pharisees were operating under the law given by God to Moses for the Israelites. The scribes and Pharisees operated under the commands of God that were given to the Israelites, Levites, and Levite priests, which required them to tithe the produce of the land and the livestock. The Israelites were commanded by God to tithe their produce of the land and livestock to the Levites, and the Levites were commanded by God to offer a tithe, or in other words, a tenth of that tithe to the Lord as the Lord's portion. The scribes and Pharisees operated under the commands of God that were given to the Israelites by God through Moses, which required them to tithe the produce of the land and the livestock so there would be food in God's house to feed the Levites, strangers to the land, the fatherless, and widows. I explained all of this to show you there was a food program during the time of Jesus Christ. And it is evident in Matthew chapter 23, verse 23, and Luke chapter 11, verse 42, that Jesus Christ endorsed the tithe program to feed the hungry, thereby giving an example of his feelings toward the food stamp program